non-profit organizations registered. And then there was another third side for the newcomers, because we wanted to see more newcomers coming in and more new companies to be formed. This eventually started to be difficult to deal with, because out of approximately 1,200,000 or 300,000 euros that was the budget allocated to the theaters, about 1 million went to the 4 older theaters, and the rest went to everybody else, which of course was not the way to help theater flourish. And so we came up with a different plan called Thimeli plan. Thimeli is a plan that subsidizes productions rather than subsidizing companies. And so again, the whole amount would be allocated to all theaters, and they came in with applications to be funded for productions. What did Thimeli do that was different? Each of the criteria it had was an incentive for theaters to further theater in Cyprus. So if we wanted decentralization, we put in an incentive for decentralization. If we wanted to support more Cypriot writing, we put in an incentive for more Cypriot writing, and so on and so forth. There were things like promoting our work, because, and I want to make a parenthesis here, the struggle you mentioned between should theater be a firm or should theater not, yeah, is a question I think everywhere almost. So we were trying to make things for theaters in a sense that both could coexist. So you would get more subsidies and you got an incentive for also promoting your work better and getting more income for it. All this happened for a while, for 20 more years, and there were pros and cons to this. There were pros and cons to theater people dealing with the matters instead of a state agency dealing with the matter. On one hand, it was great because theater people speak with the same ethos and the same ideas about theater and the same ground rules of what is practical for the theater to work, and so they can understand better other theaters and help. And you wouldn't have to be dealing only with accountants or administrative people that are far away from theater and have no idea how important certain things are for theater to exist. On the other hand, of course, because you all know, we all know theater people, there were always voices of, oh, how can the state theater, who also sells performances to the same audience, not antagonize the rest of the theaters, and how can they be deciding for subsidies? So there were pros and cons. In 2022, the government made a decision to create a deputy ministry of culture for the first time. Mind you, we're a young country. I mean, we got our independence in 1960. So this is really at the early stages. So in 2022, the Deputy Ministry of Culture took over the program Thimeli. They kept it along with their other programs, and decided to do improvements. And they decided to do improvements by listening to theater people, listening to our theater needs and agonies, and at the same time, keeping the main structure of Thimeli. This, unfortunately, led to something that was neither here nor there, because if you make an improvement that relies on a different philosophy than something in the initial plan is based on, then you sort of destroy both if they coexist. Thimeli had this year, it worked in 2 semesters, and the first semester 29 productions were subsidized. Unfortunately, only 13 will be realized, because some of the changes the ministry put in there, some considered very just, did not allow the theater groups to go on with the performances. And one interesting thing, one of these changes was the fact that the ministry said that you have to accept the common Pandeli, help me with this. Συλλογική σύμβαση. It's like a collective agreement you do with the unions of the actors. It's not a contract, it's a collective agreement between the employers and the, well, it's a basis for employment. And that had in it the fact that you had to have a minimum of 3 months contract for the actors. So it destroyed all the productions that were going to work for 2 months and did their financing according to the 2 months. Out of the 29, only 13 will be realized, and of course that led to a lot of unemployment and not enough choices for the audience. I always like to think of the theater environment in 3 pillars. It's the audience, the theater people, not just the artists, the theater people, and the structures, the theater structures, the companies. It seems like at this time it's not working for neither one. I should say that the Ministry of, the Deputy Ministry of Culture, and I will round up this, has 4 main programs for theater, and one is for culture creators and theater with about 120,000 euros. The decentralization one with 80,000 euros. Operating expenses for theater companies, which is around 200,000 euros. Thimeli has a 1.3 million. And why is the difference between Thimeli that has 1.3 million and the other arts who have 300, 400, excluding, of course, cinema? It's because theater people were there worrying about it all these years and trying to get more money and raise the funds. I don't know if this will be the case from now on. I should say that, to finish it up, the status of an artist is also a big discussion that's going on now in Cyprus, and it will be voted into a law this year. And to be frank, I'm not sure if it will help or not. It will help in some senses, and I think it might also leave great holes or great gaps that have not been addressed to, especially because perhaps theater people did not have, to my humble opinion, enough voice in it, perhaps. I will leave it at that and give the floor to somebody else, and we can discuss more later. Thank you.
Before you leave your mic, I just would like to clarify one thing. Mm-hmm. You said about Thimeli as a program of subsidies. What is the core donation? Like, what is the basic money that theater groups, not National Theatre, but other 25 theater groups, based on
Thank you. I forgot to say that. It's 1.3 million in total, but each company for a production can get between 40,000 and 15,000 euros, depending, and in between 30 and 25, depending on their, actually the way it works is with, the applications get graded or get evaluated is the word I'm looking for. And they become a status 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So according to that status, they will get 40, 35 or less money, but not less than 15,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's move, but not far from Cyprus, to Kosovo, Kustrim, yes. And also we will be very happy to hear your experience from all Balkans, possibly you have something, or Albania at least. But Kosovo first, if you please.
Yeah, thank you. Once again, I'm Kushtrim Sheremeti. I'm an actor and also, for the last 2 years, a director of National Theatre of Kosovo and a proud member of ETC with my colleagues here, and Norbert. Well, I will go back to Kosovo, but I will start in the Balkans. Like, first of all, to understand the whole context, I guess. The question is, what is Balkans actually? And Balkans is one place where everybody was trying to fight with everybody for some piece of land but at the same time, nobody doesn't want to live in it. They want to go to Germany and live. So basically, this says that it's a pretty complicated area, and we just now met in Sofia in the showcase of Ivan Vazov National Theatre in Sofia. Some 7 theaters from National Theatre from the Balkans region, or how we like to call it now, Southeastern Europe. And more or less the problematic is very similar. The core of problem is that our theaters are poor. So this creates the biggest problem of creating theater, but also like learning from this as well. There is a huge discussion in Central Europe, for example, in theaters for sustainability and how we should preserve the materials. And this is something that we did from the core since we were founded 8 years ago. And this was because we didn't have money to buy set material for every place, so we had to save things and reuse them for 30, 40 years as well. In this regard, I would just want to say that the example of Kosovo is more or less the example of most of the countries in the Balkan region or Southeastern European region. And in Kosovo, we do have one national theater, and then we have another 7 other public theaters, which are city theaters around, and then a very limited number of private theater groups. And this is mainly due to the lack of funds in general. We are fully subsidized as a national theater from the Ministry of Culture, with a budget that usually it's being decided from the Ministry of Culture and not necessarily leaded from one big analysis of our needs. This is what usually happened, and because it all depends what is the state ready to invest in culture and what is the importance of this. In the regard of having extra funds, we, like as I said, we are fully subsidized from the Ministry of Culture, like 100% of the budget that we got. We have, but we also have a right like to get other money. But we don't necessarily depend from the ticket sales in order to raise the budget. We used to have like this law in theater as well as like law on every kind of institution. Now the Ministry of Culture finally decided to change the law, so they made like a law on arts and culture, which is like a very generalized law for all institutions, and then each institution will create like its own regulatory norms in order to work, and we are right now working on these regulatory norms, so we are in a bit of transition. Also because we had like a lot of problems in decision making, even of the program. For example, we had the board that was selected from the Ministry of Culture, and then the board would select the general director and the artistic director, and then the decision-making of proposal would have to come from the artistic director to the general director, and then everything to go to the board for the final decision. So it was like few voices, few different concepts of what we want to do on stage, what we want to create on stage in order to make it happen. And it was always that we had to send, if we wanted to do 6 performances a year, we had to send 12 proposals to the board, and board would have to decide which are the 6. And these 12 were coming also as a compromise between the artistic director and general director. So it was just like all the time who was lobbying more or lobbying better, or somebody was unsatisfied. However, we survived, and when we are talking about a new country, as Mariana said, like we are a country since 2008, so like we are very champions of being young and new and creating the new rules. However, now with the new legislation, there will be like one national board on arts that will choose the directors, and they're not going to be like artistic director and a general director. It will be just like one who will be like a CEO and artistic director. So the decision making in this regard will be much easier, but also the burden of creating the decisions. I just want to make a short announcement. Whatever failed before when it was like three bodies to decide, everybody was trying to say, oh, it was not my fault, it was this guy's or that guy's fault. So it was easy even to find reasons if you failed. But now it will be like, for me, for example, much harder because I won't have any burden of who to blame out. So it will be like a national board of arts that will monitor the whole cultural institutions, for example, National Theatre or other public theaters, but also like, I don't know, opera and ballet and philharmonic and folklore dance and galleries of arts and everything. And they will also, now we will have to go in front of them, try to put the programmation and try to defend the budget, and they will give recommendations to the Ministry of Culture what is the budget needed to be given to every institution. So it will be decentralized in the regard of there will be some outsiders, not necessarily politicians, but outsiders, people of art as well, coming from community, in order to support the public institutions. The same will happen with another board that will be the board for the independent scene, that will be created in cooperation with officials of Ministry of Culture and delegated people or nominated people from different organizations. That will create this board so the independent organizations can apply to that, and then they give the recommendations also for the projects to the Ministry of Culture, who should be like being granted and what should be the amounts. Because until now there were grants for independent institutions from the Ministry of Culture. They were raising lately and they were like up to twice a year. But there were people who were deciding which theater production should be granted, and they were like, I don't know, officials for sports in the Department of Sport in the Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sport. So it was a bit fishy because it was only officials and there were so many categories, so they had to spread the officials around in the decision making. So this is coming better, an example in Kosovo, and hopefully all this what I'm saying, it's not as we speak now, today, implemented, but most probably from the second part of this year we'll start creation of these boards and the implementation of this. We are feeling that we'll be relieved a little bit in this regard, but then as a public institutions we have another trap, that we are super centralized in the sense of administration, in the sense of like controlling our accounts and spending our money. Like for example, National Theatre of Kosovo doesn't have a bank account, so all our money is there in the Ministry of Culture. It's a separated code, but it is still there. So whatever we want to spend for any kind of production, we first need to send the request to the ministry, and when I say to the ministry, it's like 5 offices, and get the signatures, and then come back, and then send another paper with another 5 signatures to say, please, can we buy some toilet paper? So it is very centralized. In this regard, the new law will help in this as well, because at least we will have this code to manage it from our office, which won't be a bank account, but will be like a specialist Ministry of Finances code that we can knock, and in the end the director will give the signature in order to proceed with the finances. This is more or less the situation with the region as well, and we, when I said in Balkans that everybody is fighting everyone for a land but nobody doesn't want to live there, it is also comes to the cooperation between the state, especially state theaters in Balkans, because of the barriers of the language as well, and because of the barriers of the past. But in our case, we cooperate a lot with the National Theatre of Albania, which is also sitting in the ETC, and also with the National Albanian Theatre in North Macedonia, which is a platform that it helps us, at least because of the same language, and more or less we have a similar market, so we can spread out our market and work in this region. And yeah, I mean, maybe we can speak on the second part for the cooperation as well. But yeah, what I want to say is that the situations in the smaller countries like Balkan countries, like Southeastern European countries, are problematic also in one regard. And I will finish, especially in the state theaters. It is because the decision-making in general, it is very politically based. So there is a lot of political influence in choosing the leaders, the directors of the national theaters as well. And not necessarily like in professional level, but rather in the very political favors of each other. And the lack of the big structure of the staff as well, like the lack of the international departments in most of these theaters, creates a problem that the sustainability or the long-term cooperation with each other or with the other European theaters, like it's our case for the last 2 years that we are cooperating with Norbert and other theaters around Europe, is that if politics decides to bring a guy just for the sake of politics, then, and with no platform of sustainability of the programs, then one guy can just come tomorrow and say, no, I don't want to work anymore, I want to just hang out with myself here and I'm totally fine, and it destroys. So it's a never-ending loop actually of creating and recreating the door for yourself outside in the world. I guess that's it for now.
Okay, let me just ask one more question to what you said. I don't think many of us envy you this supervision on money and holding.
No, actually, you should envy you because it's that challenging that you enjoy so much.
But the question I would like to ask is about different kind of supervision and expectation. Here in Poland, after the time of partitions, there is that general thought that theater should be a guard for tradition, language, national heritage, and things like that. It comes back, public discussion about theater, in a sake of waking up national spirit or national consciousness. May that be also similar reason to have that supervision from authorities, political authorities in Kosovo, very young country that may need some national spirit to be woken up?
Well, this question, I will, again, like, because Norbert asked me to speak a little bit Balkan way as well, is that in Balkans also this decides who from the leaders is more totalitarian than the others. So it just depends from country to country what the theater is serving about. In Kosovo case, thanks God, no matter who was leading the state, maybe because still there is a generation that was born and raised and survived the war as well, we are a little bit more ready to fight in the good sense for the freedom, for the liberty of expression, and this was something that we were lacking for a lot of years maybe, and this is the reason, is that our theater, it is very engaged theater, like it's very political theater, it's a very opposition theater. So not necessarily it's a tool to raise the moral, to raise the patriotism, to raise the nationalism, or to raise some issues that X governments wants to create. So basically we are not very propaganda tool, and this is also when it comes that some officials have problem with theater as well, because we are not being allowing so much. But in some other countries in Balkans, actually there is not a censorship, but there is an auto-censorship there, because like there are some theaters who already know that they should auto-censor themselves and not allow to put anything against their own. So it's about the beliefs, what you believe and what is somebody asking, but from the core, according to my personal thoughts as well, from the core of foundation of the theater was very political, and it was opposition, be it to the kings, be it to the leaders, being to the anti-gods or anything that was as a leadership, because this is the core of theater. And theater did survive so many things, and it survived the media as well. So personally, I think that it can survive this as well, to not be allowed to be used as a propaganda tool, but also to raise the moral in the sense of critical thinking for the audiences. What should they be? The reason why theater is surviving, and this is what happened, especially in Kosovo case, because we didn't have a lot of productions, but after the pandemics, I mean during the pandemic, but after the pandemics, most of our shows, and not only National Theatre, but also shows of my colleague from Chandra Multimedia here, who is among the few but most active independent theatre organizations in Kosovo, is that most of the time we are sold out. And this was not the case before the pandemics, because I guess also the people realized that theater is something that it really speaks, it communicates, it can raise this critical thinking for the environment and the places to live, and especially in the times of, let's say, changes that all humans are having after the pandemics.
Right, thank you. I hope all our audience will wake up this consciousness that they need theater. We'll go back to the subjects both of you mentioned, but Carla, sorry, I'll skip you and go to Pantelis first, if that's okay. Pantelis, Greek system and Greek theater industry, is that industry or is that free art?
Yes, industrialization was always a problem of Greece, so it's not an industry. Hello, I'm Pantelis Flatzousis. I'm a theater director from Greece, and thank you very much, Norbert, and to all hosts for the very warm organization here. I will try to be quite brief and concrete for the Greek context, and then try to open to the more European, let's say, general questions. In Greece, as you may or may not know, there are quite few state institutions. We have, in particular, 3 quite big institutions which function quite differently. We have the National Theatre in Athens, the National Theatre of Greece, the National Theatre of Northern Greece in Thessaloniki, and Athens Epidaurus Festival. The 2 national theatres have some things in common, but they also have some differences. National Theatre of Northern Greece has an ensemble. National Theatre in Athens, National Theatre of Greece, has no ensemble. They make contracts per year or per half year, I guess 3 months, 6 months, something like that. Athens Epidaurus Festival is a quite different organization, seasonal, let's say, quite connected to the tourism, the summer period. Simultaneously, there is a very, very big, independent, freelance scene in Athens, based in Athens. Unfortunately, not on the other cities, which functions mainly from the Ministry of Culture subsidies, which are on the range from 10,000 euros to 40,000 euros, let's say. This is, and in the Greek scene, we face it as a problematic function, as a function that has some severe problems, although I would say that has some severe positive things. Greek stage or Athenian stage, let's say better, is a quite energetic scene, very alive. But the amount of money and the way it functions, sets an upper level that we cannot go from beyond it. And here we have to note that the subsidies have begun to function again after 2017, because during the crisis years, the freelancing Athenian scene, I don't know how we did performances. There were no money. And of course, it functions with less. Now, the subsidies are quite lower. Of course, as you understand, it's quite difficult. It is a scene that has these problems. It is a quite narrow market. It is a market that doesn't let the artist to evolve because it is necessary. It imposes a necessary rotation on the artists. And what I mean is that a director cannot work, it's not by law, but cannot work twice in a row in the same state institution because the state institutions are too few. So it stops the development of artistic talents, and it works in cooperation, in a bad cooperation, I have to say, with a highly problematic educational system in Greece, in performing arts. Which in Greece, and I will be very brief, in Greece there are no universities for performing arts. There are something like colleges or something like that for every sector of performing arts. There are demands for such schools to be implemented. It is not to be neglected, this fact, of course. It's interesting that we're here, we're in Poland, and Carla will say some other things. I'm very interested because the systems in Europe are quite different. Although we're in a very small geographical area, we have very, very different working contexts. And of course, there are questions to be put, and there are questions to be put regarding what working status is. Do we want? What institutions? Do we need new institutions? Do we need no institutions at all? I'm not pro it, but we have to discuss it. It could be a question. What kind of institutions should it be? More inclusive, more of what? Because what I think and what I can feel as the bigger question is that what kind of working status can correspond to new forms of art. Because this is the main problem. The main problem may be that, of course, I say in Greece we have a very problematic how to say, context, cultural context, low subsidies. But on the other hand, extended safety also could be a problem in artistic institutions. So I think what we should discuss, and to put a topic and not an answer to the main question of today's discussion. I think we artists, curators, should discuss on what kind of new institutions should dream on, because that's another problem of the era. It's a quite anti-utopic era, and we cannot dream of new institutions. We have to dream of new institutions, or someone could say of no institutions at all, okay? Sorry? Structures, yes, new structures that can correspond to new forms of art, which could allow new anthropological options. This is what we are doing as artists. This is what we have to offer, and this should be, to put it softly, a question to why theater, why art, why a state should subsidy theater, which is a main question, and it has to do with independence of the institutions. I think, I'm not that old, but I can think that there were eras that the state institutions, or the state subsidized institutions to be independent. We're not in this era. We are, I think, in an era of agendas. And this is a problem we have to discuss. This is a problem we have to think how, as artists, how managers of institutions have to cope with it, and how do we have to really dream of these new structures, institutions, and how we have to dream of these institutions creating new art, putting new questions, wanting new answers to them, and persuading people, bringing people to art, and of course, because there is the last thing I would like to say, because there is also a big conversation have the states the obligation to pay for the art? Let's put it naively, this question. And it's a weird discussion, because if we ask this question, it's like putting the question, which is not exactly an artistic question, but a citizenship question. Why do we want the states if they don't subsidize the common goods? That's for me, and I hope it will be ground for discussion. Thank you.
No, not so fast. Sorry. Just one more specific question. Several years ago, there was a discussion in Poland about future of Polish theatre, and the panelists' conclusion was that we should go back to Dionysus. And you may remember that panel, possibly. And well, you've got this persona much closer in Greece. Is there an understanding for a need for new, progressive, artistic theatre in Greece from authorities that pay for theatre, and also the audience? Does audience need new theatre?
I will not reply on behalf of Dionysus, because I cannot, although I'm Greek. But what I could say is no and yes in the same time. No, there is no an understanding of the state, and there is no state policy in investing on cultural, I will not say innovation, independency, whatever will it bring. Of course, there is a lack of money, but it's not only that. The problem, I think, it's in the wider frame. But, and this is the good thing, I can see that there is a demand, let's say. There are audiences that are longing for a new kind of theater, but, and that should be the main function of a state subsidy. It is very difficult for the artists. Now I mean in the Greek context, I cannot generalize. It is very difficult for the artists to be really innovative when working in such precarious conditions. Precarity is not an artistically emancipatory condition. And it's precarity that it's not only economic precarity, it goes to existential when it is your everyday life structured in precarious routines, forms. So, yes, there is the demand, but we have to find, and I think that it should be not only, I think that culture should begin to be not only a matter of national governments, but a general EU general policies, and this is a wide discussion, that need to be further subsidized, not for the people to feel safer. Safety is not the matter, but to avoid the precarity that could be an obstacle to new emancipatory forms that may meet the demands of new audiences. I hope I answered your question, or even partially.
We may not know what we need before we get it. It's sometimes like this. And this may be a reason why we in Poland are so thankful to German theater. And that is an information that came to my mind just after the death of René Polesz. So many Polish artists, theater artists, were thankful for the work that we could see, live with, and experience and learn from Polesz, Kastrow, Ostermeyer. What is the system that made these people on stage?
Yeah, actually, I could jump immediately into your questions, but I was asked to tell you something about the German system. And when I'm talking about the German system, I'm also talking about Austria, part of Switzerland, and even a tiny little part of Italy, Southern Tyrol. So it's a total of 160 fully subsidized theater we're talking about here. And half of them is purely dedicated to drama, and the other half is in a bigger structure together with opera, musical, symphony orchestra, ballet, choirs, etc., etc. And I had the chance to work in some of those, and actually it's great fun because they're very international, and it bring international life into smaller cities because there's so many musicians, dancers, etc. from all over the world. The rest of the world, again, has around 100 opera houses, and that's why, you know, almost half of all the employments are in Germany in the musical field. Compared to France, France claims to have the same amount of theaters, 159, so it's basically the same, but the big difference is that in the German-speaking countries we have a repertoire and ensemble system, and that's the big difference. The repertoire system means we have a fixed ensemble. The structures vary from theater to theater, from region to region, but each theater has around 15 to 40 actors employed. in-house and produces up to 30 new premieres every season. And that's probably answers part of your question. It's a huge structure which produces talent, let's say. There are 120 to 1,000 permanent employees in the theater, including the artistic teams. And we have a cycle of 8 years, usually, of directors, artistic directors. So normally they come there for a 3-year period and with an option of another 5 years when they're successful, which creates a lot of pressure, of course, in the first years. And normally after 8 years, we say it's a good time to change the city. So it's like a carousel, you know, revolving around. And this density and diversity of the German theater scene has led to the recognition as part of the national inventory of intangible cultural heritage. This has been, of the UNESCO, this has been highly debated because there were people who feared we might become a museum. I don't feel that it has happened so far, but we need to watch it. The theaters also bring a lot of education they need a lot of acting schools. There are 13 acting schools from the state, financed by the state all over the countries. Not to count the numerous private schools, of course. Then there is a range of highly professional publishers dedicated exclusively to theater plays, which makes it easy for people of my profession to deal with performance rights, actually. Then there is a strong movement of theater pedagogy who has been developed since the 70s and led to every theater has theater pedagogy departments to deal with schools, to educate young people and also adults sometimes to learn how to, you know, understand theater. And there are, and this is my next point, several professional associations which are dedicated to the several professions we are dealing with in theater. For instance, my professional association is the Dramaturgical Society, which has 800 members, active members. And there are others for scenographers, for theater pedagogues, for whoever, basically. And all these theaters together performed in the season 21-22, 80,000 performances and had 14 million spectators. So these are incredible numbers. And these figures come from a very important German theater association, which is called Deutscher Bühnenverein. And this is an umbrella organization for all the theaters. They have 661 members, institutional members. Those are the theaters, the public, private, operas, symphony orchestras, etc. And this theater association has a very interesting history because we're an old, not such an old state, but it in fact was founded in the first half of the 19th century. And why was that? Because one of the intendants in one northern German theater, he found out that actors are not very reliable with contracts. If something new, better option comes up, they just jump away. So he gathered his colleagues from the court theaters together to find a solution, to like establish reliable contracts. And this is actually the basis. And the German Theater Association has been founded in 1846. And it's still today, it's a very powerful organization, although in my daily life I don't have to do anything with them, but I profit a lot from their work. And what they do, or what they did over the centuries basically, is to establish all kinds of framework, legal framework. We're working with contracts of all kinds and so on and so on. The president is always a politician and the executive director is always someone with a background in law. And then there are several working groups like the group of intendants, the group of scenographers and so on and so on. And it's kind of a lobby work to deal also with the politics and the money, the stakeholders. For instance, yesterday they implemented the new minimum wage for the theater people. It's now, since yesterday, 3,100 euros. So every assistant or young actor starts with that amount of money. Also, there are regulations for our contracts, for working hours, for holidays, for overtime payments, etc., etc. So there's a lot of regulation. It's almost over-regulated, and I will come to the good and the bad very quickly. Now I want to tell you just a few facts about my theater. It's the Deutsches Theater in Berlin, close to here. It's only 5 hours with a direct train. We have 36 actors. We produce 30 premieres in 3 venues and 1 festival dedicated to contemporary playwriting. We have 30 reruns, so we build up a repertoire of about 60 shows every season. And we rehearse around 6 to 8 weeks, mostly 8 weeks. And we have performances every day in 3 venues, sometimes only 2, and we have only 2 days during the year where we don't perform. That's on Christmas Eve and May 1st. And the rest of the year, there are shows. And our actors have 2 to 5 productions every year, depending on how good they are in negotiating and their status in the field. But in many regards, our theater is a very normal city theater. It's not a national theater. Many people think Deutsches Theater must be the national theater of Germany. No, it's not. We're just very much like everybody else. We're just in the capital, and we have the burden or whatever of a historical backpack, because so many great things have been invented in our theater. But we're very comparable, for instance, to Dresden. My colleague Charlotte Orti is in the last row, and she's from Dresden, and we are pretty much the same, basically. It's the same structure. In my theater, we have like 4 cross-sectional tasks we're addressing to all these productions we're doing. It's the sustainability issue, basically. It's the inclusion of groups into the theater that are not professional actors, like mentally disabled people, for instance. Then it's internationalization, and it's an education of our audience towards the democratic. And for that, we developed something which we call Context. We have our own division which develops evenings or events around the productions based on their topics to give more contact and to bring the audience in contact with each other, basically, and not condemn them to listen in the dark. So now I'm coming to the good, the bad, and the good always has a flip side. Of course. So first I want to say that we are of course in a very luxurious situation compared to other countries. We are basically also unquestioned by a majority of people in our country who don't maybe have a connection to theater, but they see it as a cultural heritage and worth supporting. We are well funded still, and many things are possible, but money has been reduced over the last 20 years. I'm in theater for 25 years now, and I've experienced that. It led to more efficiency and leaner structures, which is good, but also many theaters struggle today to cope and to find creative ways to deal. Also, there have been, for instance, I have been working in a theater in northern Germany where there has been a big renovation undertaken. The theater was renovated and the ballet was, thrown out, no ballet anymore until today. So, also a problem is that many theaters address only a fragment of our society, which is aging. It's an aging society, and it's a post-migrant society in Germany. And we still have this well-educated, white, older audience. So we need to develop new forms of theater. We have been introducing, for instance, widely things like a city theater structure. For instance, Dresden has been really a pioneer in this field to bring people on stage that are non-professionals. The second thing I want to mention is that competition, we are in a highly competitive field in the German countries, of course, creates a lot of creativity. But sometimes we produce for our own careers and for the critics and other theater people, and not so much for the audience. We lose the audience by being too progressive, too, I don't know, too avant-garde, whatever. Yes. Too what? Sexy. Too sexy, maybe, yeah. And the third point I already mentioned it is society is changing, and we need to deal with that. And to sum this up, I want to say some things I'm thinking about. What are the to-dos for us in the German countries? In terms of money, we need to find ways to create less with more time and more joy in order to get better quality and last longer. That's also a part of sustainability. Our productions, we're highly productive, but they don't last long. So many of them go away quickly. The second thing is in terms of outside recognition, I think we need to find ways to measure success and prove it to the politicians mainly and the stakeholders beyond commercial success. And I think this is very important because we are only measured by numbers. And I think we need to find ways, and my term is regenerative institutions. This is borrowed from NGOs. They try to measure success by how regenerative they are. So it's the next thing which comes after sustainable, let's say. And the third thing is in terms of working structures in Germany, and this is really something we can learn from here, from places like Poland, like Kosovo, like Greece. We need to find ways to put motivation for content over work-life balance. And this is what comes with the over-regulated structures we have with working hours and, actors discussing how many free days they get and so on and so on. So we need to create trust in our teams, that we care for them, but that we do something for a reason and not just for fun or just for our careers or whatever. I think the fact that theater is no ordinary business, but a place where, initially people started to change the world, at least a bit. We need to raise this awareness in Germany because we have become very much a country with a good work-life balance and a lot of commodities, and we need to change this. And in general, I think there will be a growing appetite for the real. I mean, you said that, or someone said it before. I think we can rely that in the future the analog, the slow, the silence and everything will be valued again. And that this is our unique selling point. And I think the future works for us in this way, but it's still a lot to work. Thank you.
Thank you. The 3,100 euros minimal wage. Many of us should learn German now. I think.
Yeah, but it's not a good idea because I hate the fact that Germany is also dragging away so much talent from their countries. I mean, we're doing it, but people are attracted to our country, but I mean they're needed in your countries.
The movement of people was always there, People do move. But the question I've got is about these over-regulations you mentioned. We've heard about the system, how it works in Germany and Netherlands as well. They strictly set hours of work, hours for rehearsals. Does it work as a system of care for actors and people being employed in theater? Or can you see it, as you named it, over-regulated? Is that something that may stop artistic ideas to complete?
Not really. It doesn't stop, but the problem is that people don't see their privileges anymore, and that it's really a privilege that you are safe and that there's a structure which protects you and protects your private life and your private interests. And it's a hunger for more and more and more and more. And now we do not work, 8 hours a day. We want to have 7 hours rehearsals a day, because 1 hour we need for learning the text, and stuff like that. So, and the directors, especially the young generation, they're very generous. I mean, they say, oh yeah, let's take the Friday off and everybody learns the text. So, there's no trust in, that people will not squeeze the last bit out of you.
Yeah, and as I imagine that, even if actors or team working on a performance want to work more, they cannot because of the regulations, even if they agree with director and things like this. In Poland, if we've got these hours expanded, directors usually ask actors whether they want to work like this or not. Thank you for this first series. I am almost ready to give you floor and ask you to ask your questions or fulfill the discussion. And if anyone is ready right now, I can do it now, but I have some more questions to our guests. So is there any eager to take a microphone now? Yes, sorry, first, a little bit more.
Just listening to everyone, I think I need to put in a comment about how we recognize, how each state or each country recognizes the importance of theater. And I loved your presentation and the way you spoke about how it was in the national inventory, theater was recognized in the national inventory of inheritance. I don't know if that's a bad thing depending on tradition or not, but it gives an idea of how the state views the value of theater. And I can speak of Greece and Cyprus because most of the actors from Cyprus are trained in Greece because of the language, and the fact that there was a decree out from the Greek government saying that all the diplomas from the drama schools are recognized as equivalent to high school diplomas was a huge discussion in the past 2 years. And this shows, regardless of how much money is given or how much policy is discussed on or whether the status of the artist is, when the government comes out with such decrees, it automatically shows that they have no respect for this or they don't value this as they should. And I really, really thank you for putting it back to where, how we need to remember that we started making theater to change the world and that our states need to incorporate that into their actions.
Actually, I've been working in Switzerland and Austria as well, and Austria is even more astonishing than Germany. Compared to the number of their inhabitants, they're 1/10 of Germany, more or less. They give much more money per head for art because they know it's cultural diplomacy. They know Austrians are very active in all kinds of, especially when it comes to music, to classical music, because they have an expertise based on their history, and they know that it's worth investing in that. So it's really impressive in Austria how much money they put into art, and it's actually even you shouldn't think about going to Germany. Go to Austria. It's a much nicer country.
Yeah, I'll ask Thomas Bernhard and Schwab how nice it is. Okay, so here we are. Yes, we're ready to open space for you. Anyone? I've heard, yes. Maciej has a microphone for you.
Thank you very much, friends.
Can you introduce yourself first?
I'm Luke. I'm an independent artist and producer, actually from Australia, but I'm based at the moment in Athens in Greece. Thank you so much for sharing this conversation. I'd like to offer maybe another perspective from the Southern Hemisphere and particularly how it's inflecting how I'm thinking about this question about where we are now as an emerging artist and an emerging producer. The example in Australia, I think, actually points potentially towards a direction that I think some of the examples we've heard today are heading, in that it's a highly bureaucratic and system for financing theatre that is almost entirely administered by public bodies. I think largely the reason why this is because it's a settler colony. So there is no history prior to 1700 of embedded theatre culture. It was entirely imported, imposed on the place. And that means that artists who are born and grow up in Australia and try and make work there struggle to conceptualize theatre and performing arts as something that has a kind of a longevity and a social function, and then even more so, a general public doesn't really have that conception. So you have a huge lack of solidarity for live art in this country. What this says to me in considering where we are now is, and what I wanted to share, is that artists are largely not trusted to make decisions about how finance should be used. And I think this goes to a question of why we are all here and who we serve. And a large part of the conversation we've heard today has been about how a lot of curators and arts administrators seem in the 21st century to conceptualize their role as how to better bureaucratize, how to better streamline the way that financing is administered. Like, we began this panel and all of you led with this, like, what is the financial structuring of this thing? I think, and I would like to put it to us here, that actually artists already have the tools that they need to realize structures to make performance, to reach audiences, and that a lot of those things are often antithetical to the logics of governments because they are actually about working with communities in a really, really proactive way, right? Like, as theatre being like a living performance, being a living experiential process, means that it's something that's often very difficult to make bureaucratic, or at least it often challenges the structures that we have. And we kind of got there at the end of that conversation, right? So to answer this question of where are we now, I feel like I want to say in many ways we are facing in the wrong direction, because to look up towards institutions, towards governments, and to say we need to control this better and we need to give, like literally give autonomy and give power towards you, rather than turning around towards artists, towards ways of working and ways of organizing that have operated for like centuries, if not millennia, and reinvesting in those. It doesn't feel to me like the question is whether the state should invest in performing arts. The example that Carla gave is that absolutely, the state can do that and can do it generously. My fear or my anxiety is in asking for this investment, how much do we give up to the state? Can we keep that, and what is a healthy separation that protects the individuality, the autonomy, the creativity and imaginative capacity of artists? And in that separation, the end of the thought has gone. But essentially this idea of who do we serve, and what are our obligations to those people and those artists, and are we potentially facing the wrong direction?
Thank you, Luke. This is a very important issue, actually, whether all of us can say we need more money and less control. Is that the way we should think about the future of art? Is that the best way, actually? Or do we have any worked out ways of possible contact and exchange with organizers, with people that give money to us, to support and make feedback, give feedback for us as working artists, or just supervise to make statements and like make us doing what they want. So let keep that question open. Do you have an open channels for communication with authorities that pay for theaters? Do you have like agreement, or is that there is also an opinion that sometimes comes out in Poland, that you cannot run theater, especially if it's a venue and ensemble together, without a conflict with organizers, with politicians. Do you agree with people that pay money for what you do for society, or do you struggle still? Is there anyone that wants to answer or develop the thought?
I should add that a lot of times the issue is also the unity between the theaters, or the way that us theater people between us collaborate or don't collaborate, or create smaller groups that try to pursue different interests within the fact that we are theater companies. And that has also, in my experience, been the problem. I wouldn't say that we have issues with the authorities giving the subsidies. on matters of content or decisions. No, and that's actually one of the rules that the state should not interfere. There's a lot of public consultations, and there's also private consultations. And I'm afraid that it always goes back to the question of, yes, we want more artistic freedom, but sometimes the way we artists go about it does not gain more artistic freedom because we pursue different or particular interests. So for example, in the situation I described in the beginning, there is now two groups formed between the smaller private theaters. One are the older, quote-unquote, established theaters, and the other is the newer groups that are trying to bring on change and that are smaller in numbers, etc. And now it has become what do you call it? Emphilios? A civil war between the theater people, and that's awful. I think the situation that you describe is utmostly essential for the governments as well. If the governments and the states want to create situations and structures that will help theater flourish, they have to look towards the artists and hear the artists. Otherwise, it becomes a wooden box that just encloses everyone rather than allowing for creative freedom.
Yes, but the question still arises whether people, also all the people in the countries, in our countries, do they understand we need theater, and theater needs to be found, need to be subsidized, need to take money to run and to do our job for the people. It's like in the crisis of 2008, the first cuts were on culture. In the crisis of COVID-19, 2020, first cuts, culture. Then Ukrainian war, and still, any problems with taxes in Poland? The first group that has to experience cuts is culture.
We have even heard, we have companies as well, other companies. Why shouldn't the state subsidize us and subsidize your firms that are doing theater? It is the issue, you're right.
Actually, I just remember for the cuts last year in North Macedonia, because of the rise of the electricity prices, they cut the budget of all theaters in order to have some more money to pay the electricity bills, the state, and also to not allow theaters to spend a lot of electricity because it looks like we are big spenders. So there are like even worse examples than whatever. The problem is that you asked also at the beginning, is it theater film or not? Like, should we go? Also in the films, the art houses, house movies are being subsidized. It's not possible so much to get the revenues back in the cinemas for that. So it depends also what we want to produce. Do you want to produce just the boulevard commercial things, which is fine in a sense, or is it our obligation, especially as a state, as a public theaters, to try and produce art in the sense of what we believe the art is and what theater is and how we want to approach it? And in this regard, it is impossible to live without subsidies and to exist without subsidies. But for a normal mindset of a state, as Germany, that means that states should believe that theater is an amazing tool for the critical thinking, for the education of the people that they do lead. And then this is the difference from state to another. Does the state want to believe this? And do they want to put back the taxes of the people that are paying from their own goods to their education, or they want to treat it? Yes, also in Balkans there are some states that governments that don't really care for theater. That's why they do maybe intervene as well. They say, okay, do whatever you want, I'll give you a few money, I'll put you as a director, and then just don't say anything for me and do whatever you want. And even the sense of sales and everything. The problem is, what do we want from theater? And we go back again to the core, why the theater does exist, and is it the most entertaining thing in this world or not? But for maybe this is very subjective, because usually theaters are led by theater people. But we really do believe that we can somehow, yes, change the world. And for the whole production, even if we can manage to change one opinion of one of the audiences, people in the audience, then it's worth trying and worth not giving up in this regard. And I know it might sound utopic, but actually it's not, it's a real thing.
I think it's also when we work together, it's like a living utopia, you know? It's like so many different people working from different fields, from different professions, backgrounds, etc., working on the same goal. And there's a claim of, a very good claim, I think, from the Dramaturgical Society's head, Harald Wolf. He put this into the world, and we use it. It's theaters are like the four posts of democracy. So that's where we learn how to fight for, you know, for our opinion and accept the other ones as well, and so on. And but I think there is not one direction. I think, and that's the specifics about Europe, that every country has such a specific background and history that it's not wise to try to copy one successful model to another country. It will not work probably. But rely on your own strength and the own necessity, why the institution is there and what it could do good in your country. Yeah?
Yeah, but we are here to share experience, even if we cannot implement your experience into our area. It's always like this. Sorry. Yes, you wanted to say?
No, I just wanted to add one small thing what was said now. When I said all these laws that we have, the block laws, like the National Theatre of Kosovo exists since 80 years, and Kosovo state exists since 2008, so we are older than our state. The problem was that after the war and during the creation of our state, we had all these big European countries who helped us develop the laws and everything. In this regard, they didn't bring like a specific laws for theater, like say Germany or any kind of country. They brought laws how the state institutions should work, and this was taken also for theater, and that's why all that bureaucratic things that are there came from an experience of state institutions. Let's assume in Germany, but they were not meant directly to theater. So you always have to get this experience, what you said, but also adapt it in your society or in your situation.
Going one step back to your initial question, you asked, do you agree with people you give money? I would say that although I have never experienced forms of, in a way, censorship, of conflictual relations with artistic director. I'm not an artistic director, I'm a theater director, so I will I will talk about this relationship. But I would say two things. First of all, that of course such occasions exist in Greece of intervention to the artistic work from institution directors. And the second thing, and I think that the most important, is that there is a kind of inner censorship of artists. I also include me on these artists. I also include the vast majority of art, of performing arts, I am experiencing. It is a very big issue, and I think it can go together with what I was talking about, agendas, because And to what I think Luke said about the independence and freedom, which is a very important conversation to be discussed. And in a way, maybe in art, us, the artists, I mean, maybe we have to find again the importance of conflictual relationships with directorships, because independence and freedom, difficult terms, I don't know in what forms they exist. I'm quite convinced that they exist at the time of the conflict, and especially of the conflict with someone stronger. So I think that it may be something we have to reinvent, because every institution that is that funds has agenda, even private or state, and of course there is a need of, let's say, a very used and quite old-fashioned word, but there is a necessity of resistance, of a reinventing resistance to make it a little bit more relevant again.
Thank you, Pantelis. This option may have pros and cons as well, but as you mentioned, auto-censorship, there is that essay of Freud that says that culture is a source of pain for one, is something that stops us for doing anything we want. The theater is a part of culture. We had, yes, the first person, sorry, just behind you, and then you again, please.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate. I'm from Ukraine, left Banksia to Kiev. So really nice to meet all of you here. I would probably give like a short overview about the questions that have been raised today, because I have a lot of comment actually to maybe share. As all of you know, we are in a full-scale invasion war with Russia second years, but we have a really a theatrical renaissance, I must say, in Ukraine now. First of all, I believe it's just a question of the audience, that they really need the theater to have some relief in the whole this atmosphere of real psychological struggle for a long time. And this is the thing that really inspires us to continue in any conditions that we have. And I'm speaking about not only like the issue of financial, but even about the infrastructure, as you mentioned. Like we got through the season of blackouts when we have been playing like with flashlights from the mobile phones, but still we played, we did, and it continues. So nothing could stop generally. Regarding the financial situation, we are a municipal theater, so we have some funds from the states generally, but we also like continue our productions mostly with the help of grants and supplies international support, because it's always was a course of the theater to continue to establish actually these connections for a long time, like since 2018-19 we have been on tour and trying to find out some international partnership, and the theater was always looking for the like European way, let's say so. And basically now we are still trying to implement like as much as we can from that we learned. And in Ukraine, we have still continuous the financiation of Ukrainian Cultural Fund. That is actually a governmental fund. The general, their amount of money is around €500,000, so it's particularly nothing compensation with like some countries, but still it's an opportunity. And I believe all theatrical managers are fighting for this grant supplement now, but still it's very clear. It's based on really nice systems that invented not only for the theatrical financiation, but for different kinds of artistic spheres in Ukraine. And even like this year, they launched also a grant system. So we are pretty trying to get what we have and to continue to produce, let's say so. About the regulation, we are a bit wild east, let's say so. We had an opportunity to compare actually with Deutsche Theater, because we launched the premieres there like a year ago, Halt. And there are a lot of things that probably we would like to implement, I must say, but also we could benefit from this wild world is still, because our artists, directors, producers, whoever, they're really like looking forward for the result in this condition, and sometimes we really go into this, okay, let's maybe a little bit overwork, but still make it. And in terms of like international policy and internal policy, cultural policy generally, we are not into this artistic control. The theater is a free territory generally, so the Ministry of Culture doesn't say to us still, even like in terms of maybe sometimes needed, let's say, educational vector or whatever, what we need to premiere with which text work or whatever. It's still our decision, and there were some programs for film industry to create patriotical content, whatever, documental content, but not for the theater. But we are generally like very fast in reaction, so there are a lot of documentary theater now that produced on the text based for like that have been written in previous years. So that's why we are just going independent, and that's it. We also launched a project, actually a festival for emerging directors, like in 2022, Mytnica, that gives an opportunity for basically everyone who would like to try themselves as a director to make it, and the theater find out the finance for the winner to stage a play in a theater by our own. So we are just going by ourselves and looking forward just for actually the support of partners, commercial one, and grants. That's basically it.
Thank you.
Sorry, I actually wanted to have like a small comment, a question for you. How does it work for you in terms of like working with international cultural funds, maybe grants? If you can share some cases, it would be good.
Would you like to answer? Would anyone from the audience would like to take some time and continue this thought?
Thank you very much. My name is Radbad Klinstra-Komornicki. I'm half Dutch, half Polish. So where are we now in Poland? Well, it's sad to say that we are still in a communistic system in the theater. We are still in a very hierarchical system, and it's like the communists needed to control the theater because of its revolutionary potential. It is the system is still open for political control. It depends on the personality of the one who is in charge in the region or in the ministry, and the personality of the one who is in charge of the theater and the relation they can build. But it's not detached, so that's a big problem, I think, still. But concerning like the question of should a theater be a firm or a process, well, I think most of us had this very traumatic experience during the COVID. In Poland, at least, we were first to close, last to open, and in the first weeks we had, at least in some conversations, it was very clear that we had the feeling of, well, okay, so we are not needed. The real jobs is the people in the store, the policemen, the doctors, and we can be close and nobody cares. So that was a very confronting moment of thinking, okay, so why is that? Why is that possible? Of course, later on, it seems that after people got covered with their basic needs, it seems that the theater, of course, is very much needed, and the question became, are we ready to answer that need of people coming to the theater to understand in which situation they are living now? That, of course, developed even more after the pandemic started to go down a little bit, and then the war started, and then again people stopped going to the theater because it was also not appropriate to go, for example, in the first weeks to a comedy, or also to go play a comedy. So again, very confronting, like where could the function of the theater be? And when we further developed this dialogue within artistic community, well, we understood, I think, that well, we are the ones who are responsible to show to the end public, who gives the public money, to prove that we are needed, that they need us. And in this sense, we are also in a very pathological situation in Poland, that an average budget of a theater, only, I think, between 6 and 19% is only money which you can use for projects. The rest is costs of the building, of all kinds of things. So, in fact, I think it could be a very simple question of also about control, like what is the percentage of the public money given to a theater or institution that actually is turned over into a project that through which we give back to the people their public money. That could be some kind of a measurement, because, well, our theater is, the last 2 years we have had millions of controls. Our region is very control freaky. So, and I see that they're controlling all kinds of things, but not that what I would need to have some measurements, like where's the money going. And I really understood that this is the thing that we have to discuss between the artistic, the institutions. Like you said, you have the theater people, you have the organizers, but also the audience. And there should be an ecological system made in which we have some kind of a logic, in which we can talk about, okay, is that public money used in a good way? And then maybe it would not be necessary to do it so bureaucratical, but more on the base of trust. Okay, I give you, as an artistic director, money, and after a year, we see how much of that you gave back. So that's what I think it could be the issue. So, and in this sense, I think it is wise to take from companies the way in which they optimize how they spend money. Of course, it's not probably a good measurement to measure how much money a theater can make in a commercial sense, but I think it could be very well measured that like what you said is in Germany, how much you can optimize in a company to free as much as possible money for the artistic projects.
Right. Thank you very much. That's like very important issue, and I think we all remember that giving back is not just paying back money, because culture makes growth, even industrial growth. In general, and we know theories of the Professor Hausner, let's say, and things like this. But if you start from the critiques of the system, comparing that to socialist system, and then ask for money, then we may still put ourselves in an opposite position, asking whether isn't that a little bit too socialist, thinking that we just have to be given money for production and not think about making money or making an income for more expensive productions we expect. Then, if you ask about hierarchy and supervision from authorities, maybe the first step would be to have this kind of transparent competitions for any people that are in charge, and transparent spend of money, transparent, not that just supervised by politicians. So we may think about it, but there are like different threats in any case. It's good to discuss. You are the first to ask or to say anything more, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your inputs. I'm Aurelia Cadriu from Kosovo, a program director at Centra Multimedia. I guess from the very few ones from the independent cultural scene, and this is what I want to ask the panelists, but also the audience, about the communication between public theaters and independent theaters, and also about international networking and co-productions. But before that, I'll give some context of what it is like to work in the independent cultural scene in Kosovo, since we are in a spirit of sharing. So, Centra is very unique in the sense that it is the only one most consistent independent cultural organization doing theater. Over the year, we have three or four more independent cultural organizations doing theater sporadically, like they produce one show a year and then they don't produce for 2 more shows, but we have a system of producing 2 to 3 shows a year, and we also co-manage the only independent theater in the country, which is Teatru Oda. So we manage the monthly program. There are 5 to 10, 10 to 15 shows every month at the theater, and we also run the Kosovo Theater Showcase, and we also co-produce and tour a lot locally and internationally. Just to put it in short, so we go the entire cycle. So we produce, we also work in education programs for emerging artists in the sense of organizing master classes, and laboratories of playwriting, of directing, of stage readings of emerging artists, and we also publish plays. So we translate, we go in a circulation of translating regional plays. But when it comes to the collaboration, the communication with public theaters, there is still this gap that is, you know, the way we are perceived, even though we are like very heavily invested. And being a program director, I think a lot in developmental mindset, because from outside it looks like we are very rich, but of course we are like, at our best years, we operate on an annual turnover of a little bit more than 500,000, and a very short staff, of course, even though on the outside it looks like we are very rich. But most of this money, a lot of this money, we also invest on building bridges with public theaters, creating also platforms, because public theaters are heavily suffocated in bureaucracy, and we don't have that. So we try to create these paths of them benefiting from the platforms that we create by not having to spend anything, basically, or have to spend very little. But there is still this, you know, if the managers, because, and Kostrim can back me up on this, we collaborate in the sense that also our buildings are now very close in the sense of exchanging equipment. But when it comes to the boards, there is still this arrogance of public theaters, of national theater, collaborating with NGOs, even though we are there proving ourselves, so to say. Kustrim has to go through has to climb a big mountain to convince the board to collaborate with NGOs. They use this term in a derogatory manner. So what is it like in your countries? I am quite familiar with also with the international networking in Germany, because we have co-produced with Volksbühne, with Theater Dortmund, with Euroscene Leipzig, and we have performed in more than 20 German theaters, our shows. So I'm quite familiar with the openness and the flexibility, but still I would like to hear your perspective. And also Pantelis and Marina, Kustrim doesn't have to say a word. I know we struggle together on this, so thank you.
That's a very important issue, actually. And before we move forward, can we stop a little while on this one, please? Anyone from the audience? Anyone from our guests? Yes.
My name is Dorota Buchwald. I'm taking part in our theater life from 30 years, and my job is theater documentation. And the question for you, I think very important for our tomorrow discussion is your countries exist any systems to support artists, unemployment or entire artists? As the artists are special status is law in your countries, because now we are in very great discussion about this, how support to this.
I can maybe answer it from Germany. It's there are two things coming to my mind. Maybe Charlotte, you know a little bit more about or can add something which I might be missing. So first of all, there's a special agency. It's directly linked, or it's a part of the job center of Germany. So it's a general job agency of Germany, has a special division only dedicated to artists. It's not only theater people, it's also film and musicians, etc. So they care for their needs and try to bring them back into jobs. So that's very good because they're free. You know, they're agents who don't get money, basically. You don't have to pay them. And the second thing is that there's something, it's called the Künstlersozialkasse. It's a special insurance, I would say, but it's only for freelancers. And since I'm not a freelancer, I don't know how it works exactly, but I hear that people who are in this, they're quite well supported when they are without job or unemployed for a while.
But it's not like the system in Belgium or France, for example, with the intermittent, where you have like a kind of a full wage on the base that you are working a certain amount of days a year, because Künstlersozialkasse in Germany, it's the health insurance with special conditions. And what we have in Germany as well, it was invented, I think, for the actors, but as well for the dancers, is the retirement Bayerische Versorgungskammer. So we have a augmented tax deduction every month, but it's for those who are employed at the theaters to secure a bit better their retirements. So there are some tools, but they are not putting you through the year in case you get unemployed.
And the Greek experience may have something to add in this question. No, there is no a special unemployment status for the unemployed art workers. But what may be of interest is that the COVID crisis, the pandemic crisis, brought into light the fact that a lot of art workers worked without an insurance. And that created a very big and even demonstrations after the first lockdowns. It is, of course, a result of working deregulations that are, let's say, further results of the economic crisis, and it was brought to light after COVID. Of course, it is not regulated. It didn't change, and there's no way to change this working without insurance for a lot of people, especially the performers. In general, they have no insurance when they work, except when they perform. The rehearsals are maybe without an insurance at all. So
So the
they
rehearsals
cannot.
are also without a
So,
pay a lot
yeah,
of times
I
in
know
Greece.
they get paid now. Now it
Okay.
has changed. So they cannot they cannot apply for an unemployment because they are not visible.
I can say in Cyprus that there is a social insurance system that, like the colleague in the back said, is mostly for the pension years, but also if you have worked for a certain amount of time in 1 year, then the next year you're entitled to an unemployment quote-unquote salary. That's a percentage of the minimum salary you would get. It's not specific to artists. It's for all people. The problem, I think, goes back to the status of the artist in general, and I have to say that both in Cyprus and Greece, for the longest time, the social insurance system didn't have a code for artists who work in theater or painters, or artists didn't have their own code. For the longest time in Cyprus, there was one code that included everyone, from people working in cabarets, prostitutes, artists, da-da-da-da-da-da. I know that in Greece it was created some years ago, and again now in Cyprus it's also, at least it's recognized as a different status. And also, like I said at the beginning, there is a law now ready to be passed recognizing the status of the artists so that they can have some sort of, I don't want to say insurance, but security, depending when they don't work or in their later years. Fact of the matter is that the pandemic brought in light a lot of awful situations, and a lot of, there was a system actually for, that put up by a few actors to feed other actors. I mean, they were actually getting food to other actors because it got really bad during the pandemic. We were the first ones to kick back and open. I think we were the first ones because of good weather as well. We opened in open-air theaters. But again, there's a lot of unemployment, and there's a lot of talent spilling. You know, people are having to leave theater to go find other jobs that can bring food on the table. And I think that's a common thing. No other system for securing an artist who wants to create without being part of a structure. That's a different thing, and I would wish to see that, since somebody said let's dream, I would like to see a structure that allows artists to create without having to submit to the state or to another structure, but fully realizing their own dreams. And I'm speaking of artists in general, not just theater, but all the other arts. When it comes to your question about how we collaborate, how state agencies collaborate with NGOs, I'm not sure if the spirit of antagonism doesn't win over in those situations, and you know, they feel that we are fighting for the same audience, so we do our thing, they do their thing, and if we come across a common ground, then we can collaborate. We've not been working that way in the Cyprus Theatre Organization. We've been very supportive, feeling the responsibility of being the state theatre in Cyprus. We've been really supportive of theatres, even in terms of buying equipment for them or exchanging equipment and things like that. However, now that the responsibility of the private theatres has left the state theatre, I'm not sure how our boards are going to be viewing this type of collaboration. I have to be honest about this.
Let me just follow the thought and your question about cooperation. This is the question that if we answer that between so many managers from theaters here may not be so safe because you've got a lot to do anyway. But that's also a question about duties that theater as cultural institution may have for society in general. Having venues like this, beautiful, and just after spectacular renovation, thank you, Norbert, but also having not just artistic ensemble, but administration that may help NGOs and of culture. This is the question about supporting each other. If one leg doesn't work, then second would not work as well. Pandemic taught us something, and in my town, in Poznań, we trained this scheme of co-working. It's like local authorities were giving money to cultural institutions to employ independent artists or groups of theater groups to give them job. Not just artists, but people from professions connected with art in general. And that made the way for them to survive crisis, pandemic crisis, but also gave an opportunity to cooperate for the future. So that may be something that is useful.
Just to clarify, financially, how the independent organizations, like cultural organizations, we as Chandra, we are quite sustainable financially. So it is not a matter of a financial need to communicate with the public theaters. It's more of a mission, and that we share together, that we have understood as being vital. But it is the boards and it is the bureaucracy that does not recognize it. But I just wanted to add, I think it's important for the discussion that how we are funded as organizations is that up to 2022, we used to get like 0.5 to 1.3% of our overall budget from the Ministry of Culture, and now that amount is like 9 to 9.5 of our overall budget. So we depend on international donors. So this is how we are financed, and thankfully we have developed a very sustainable structure of financing. So I was just saying, so it's not a matter of financial interest, it's more of a matter of a mission, because we work in a very small industry.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. I just would like to add one dream, because I like the question, how can we start dreaming of other structures? Of course, the relation between the tax money and the arts field is always ambivalent. On the one side, it is giving a base for continuity. On the other side, it's precarious. Look at Italy at the moment, look at Hungary, and the moment the political power is changing, a lot of questions may occur. There is one book by a German curator who had lately been translated into English, therefore it makes sense to mention it. It's by Florian Malzacher, and it's called The Art of Assembly. And he is talking about the fact that every performative event is creating a temporary community. And I had the feeling when reading the book, it appeared in Germany in 2020, that it's a kind of a core aspect of what we all do in a way, and that could be a point of departure maybe to start dreaming and to invent new aspects, a part of the structures we are all in, because the question of acceptance has something to do of how we encounter our audiences. And of course the structures, I'm as well from a German very potential structure, have these potentials, but it may really make sense to learn from small structures, to learn from Gendra Multimedia, to learn from a very small independent theater in Barcelona, the Antique, who is fighting every year to convince the owner of the venue to let them stay there, and they're making most of their money with the bar they have, because it's a lovely place in the middle of a very stressful part of Barcelona. So, and sometimes I have the feeling that, like, from my point of view, we as a structure don't know so much about the small structures and the NGOs. And for me, I would say it's a gift, for example, when you in Kosovo are just having you both looking at each other and are able to do things together, because I think on the long run, as well, the board will be convinced at a certain point, but maybe not in case it comes to, in case political parties come into power who are not interested in these temporary communities. But I think for the arts field, and for me, it's the point of departure to learn from the artists, but as well from what happens in the audiences.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we still have some time? Yes. There is a question from our host, Norbert, that had to leave for rehearsal. He's sorry, and I'm sorry for him that he had to leave. But the question that Norbert wanted to ask to all of you, especially, of course, you here at the church, is how do you choose the people to employ in your ensembles? Actors and other artists, do you have any method, any scheme, any plan that you followed? Is there any way you can share?
Yeah. In our case, it's firstly we want to decide to employ somebody in our resident ensemble, which by law has to be 30. Right now we have 22. Still, we need to depend from the Ministry of Finances to allow us to open calls for 8 more people to be part of that, even though by law it has to be 30. If they don't allow us, because there are some certain numbers in the administration that cannot be exceeded, that we cannot open them. At the same time, we have like a opportunity to hire especially actors, but also other artworks for the performances. We hire them and contract them per performance, and this is we do in a direct negotiation, like without any kind of procedure, except just like creating one contract per performance, which is usually in lengths like 1 year, with the possibility of extension of the for another year as well, depending on the needs. How long do we want to run that performance? But otherwise, anything else, it goes through the state channels, and they are treated like normal administrative bodies, which is wrong. And for the actors in the resident ensemble, we still now, I mean, as I said in the beginning, we are in a good moment right now because we are doing this reform with a new law. So we are, I mean, for me, even personally, listening all these stories and hearing also the subjects will be good in the implementation of the new regulations starting from, let's say, September and on. But usually it was through the public calls and through auditions and through normal applications. And sometimes it's really weird to get somebody that you even know and even like played in different stages, but you still need to do in a very classic way, like in university, that okay, show me something that you can prove it on that regard. So it is complicated, but also possible to do these shorter term contracts. But for the residents ensemble is like pretty problematic. But there is another problem as well, that it is hard to hire them, but actually it's even harder to fire them. So this is then the other trick, vice versa, that to fire an actor or anybody in Kosovo, it takes at least time-wise with all the regulations, some minimum 7 months that you have to start, and the possibility that it will be returned from the court after 2 years or 3 years or 4 years and get all the salaries and be there as well. They are huge because by the laws that we have for the employees, they are very friendly to the people who get employed, for the workers actually, and not very friendly for employers.
Please, Marina.
For us, we had a very interesting system that doesn't exist anymore for the State Theatre. We had 24 permanent positions on contract. How can it be permanent and be on contract? It was yearly contracts that were renewed, and each year the theater could ditch the contract and hire somebody else, but those 24 positions who had the so-called permanent positions were entitled to compensation. This has ceased to exist, and now we hire by auditions. The director can get whoever they want, and these are with 3-month contracts. And for the most time, it stands what you mentioned, I think, Pandelimu, that contracts have to not be consecutive. So if you work for one play and the next director wants you, they cannot have you in that sense.
But it's also one person's decision, is it?
It's the director. The director artistically and his team will decide who they want for the part for when it comes to actors. This creates an issue in my book that a lot of you, I would be interested in hearing opinions, whether a core is needed in a theater or whether actors should be just changing the whole ensemble should be changed the whole time. We've experienced both, and we've seen good things happen with one situation and good things happen with the other. So that's why I think it's interesting. Sometimes a core creates a kind of brand for the theater that can be perceived as for good as bad, but it creates also a kind of, I don't want to say ethics, I hate the word in this sense, but a kind of set of rules, I don't know, or a set of conduct perhaps, for the theater that might create all the good things that come with a nucleus, that a lot of around it can change, but there can still be some sort of brand for that theater. On the other hand, changing the whole ensemble the whole time brings new ideas, creates a new situation, can be more innovative, can give opportunities. So it's this back and forth of opinions.
I think it depends of the size of the ensemble. When it's big enough, then you won't have the problem. When it's too small, then you probably have conflicts that you cannot solve so easily. So we do it exactly like what you described. We have yearly contracts which are prolonged without notice, but can be terminated in October for the end of the season. So it's very easy, and after 15, this is very specifically German, not in Austria, not in Switzerland. After 15 years in a consecutive way, in one theater, one cannot be fired anymore. So, but this is also debated whether this is good or not. But it doesn't happen anymore, because if someone reaches the 14th year, he gets kicked out, and to not create stress for the next artistic director.
In Greece, of course, in the freelance, let's say, sector, it's the director who decides. It's easy to understand. It's different in National Theatre of Greece. The recent years, there are 3 months contracts that get renewed or no. Usually what happens in National Theatre of Greece is that now with the 3 months contract, it doesn't. But what happened when there were a 1-year contract, let's say, which was not so, it was in 2020 or 2021, the director decides, the theatre director decides who the performers will be and the other people working on production. But when there are contracts, the institution proposes some people that they're on contract, but with the 3 months, it functions as a freelancing institution. Athens Epidaurus Festival does not employ, does not work as an employer of artistic staff. They employ only administrative staff. They pay employers to employ artists, Athens Epidaurus Festival, production companies, exactly. The National Theatre of Greece is a totally different example because they have an ensemble. They call sometimes other performers. There is quite big conflict with local characteristics because the performers from Thessaloniki want to perform there themselves and not to others from Athens to be called. But National Theatre of Greece has an ensemble, and to go a little bit further to Marina's, sorry? Of Northern Greece, sorry, yes. To go one step to Marina's question, it's a bad example of ensemble because although there are many talented young performers which are very, very enthusiastic and very talented, there are people, and it is common, unfortunately, in National Theatre of Northern Greece, that they haven't performed since 10 years or 15 years, but they cannot be fired because they are
that's not
an
the
ensemble.
kind of core I was talking about.
And yes, but it is a kind of problem with ensemble because these people many times when the directorships have changed in the past and they had a different, let's say, the word vision for the institution, there was a great resistance to change because, of course, we can all understand that it's very good for them not to be paid and not perform at all. So it's the bad example of an ensemble.
One
Can I add
sentence.
something?
Yeah, just short. Like also being an actor besides a producer and director, there is always this discussion, but there is always this social responsibility as well towards some people who contributed for a long time. And then, of course, it depends from the director to director. It was more or less similar situation in our theater, but somehow I managed to engage these people who didn't work for 10 years, and each of them in the cycle of the year worked at least in 2 performances. So you can always engage actors. You can never have like the best actors in the troops, but the sustainability of theater, in our case, of National Theater, so the core sustainability is from the actors of the artistic ensemble. From 22, I mean, the reason why we have 8 less now, it is because 8 in the meantime retired, and now we need like to get the newer generations. So in our case, it's like from the young generation until the old generation. So there is always a possibility of the cycle and changing the actors. So it's not the equivalent generations. And whatever we need extra that we don't have in our ensemble, we always hire per production with a 1-year contract. They can come work just to center that production. But if you are a repertory theater, then it's impossible, according to me, it's very hard, let's say, almost impossible to work without a resident ensemble of actors. Because you run the shows throughout the year, maybe sometimes 2 years, then actors gather like 4 or 5 productions that are playing simultaneously. And if you don't have them, like if you have a freelancers, if one freelancer just decides to cut the contract, then you will lose all your repertory for a certain moment. With the residents, even though you're paying some more, you have a guarantee for the sustainability of your repertory.
Thank you, Christian. That was one sentence, quite long though. Please, your time.
Hi, I just wanted to add something about the Athens Epidaurus Festival because Pantelis mentioned it. I'm Daphne Politi and I represent the festival. On what Pantelis said is that the Athens Epidaurus Festival is obviously, it's a big festival, does music, dance, and theater, and it does almost like 80 productions a year. So it runs from June to August every year, and it has 80 productions, international and domestic. So it would be very difficult, obviously, to to employ people individually. So that is the reason why we work with production companies that are usually owned by the directors, and that's how the productions are presented in the festival. And because we are talking about employment kind of relations, I wanted to add something more about how a governmental institution like the Athens Epidaurus Festival, because it is completely 100% state-funded, what is the relationship with their staff, that is not the artistic teams, but the people working for the festival. And it is, unfortunately, a place that seasonality is quite, apparent to everyone. It's a festival that starts from 40 people during the year and goes up to 300 during the summer period. And usually there are contracts that start from 3 months to 9 months. So, there is an obligation from the festival to, to manage this precarity. But at the end of the day, it is something that, it's part of the, of the theater scene in Greece and of the, of the artistic team. What, sorry?
No, sorry, no, it was not.
Yeah. So yeah, that was my addition. I just wanted to clarify that, and also something that Pantelis said in his introduction about the Athens Epidaurus Festival being linked to tourism, which is something that whenever there's whenever there's the ancient Greek heritage attached to something, there is obviously the touristic part, and because the festival has 4 different venues. 3 of them are ancient Greek theaters, so there is that aspect of, having people visiting the festival in order to visit the ancient sites. But on the other hand, that also creates, an obligation by the festival towards the community that all these festivals are located at. So, for example, we're talking about this with Pantelis yesterday, the area of Epidaurus that the 2 ancient Greek theaters are located at gives work to all the people living there for the 2 months of the summer period. So it kind of like, there's many different ways that the festival kind of creates opportunities and changes the lives of communities within
It sounds
Greece.
very good, actually. Yeah, I
Thank
think that we need more ideas like that. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests and hosts, time is up, and I don't think we've got much more time to discuss before lunch break, because not all of us can live only on art. But the last question Mr. Redband Klistra wanted me to ask to each of you sitting here is the question about the status of an artist, whether a person is being employed by an institution or not. Are there like differences to be treated by law in the way that are they discriminated? So yes, this is the question. But we already mentioned an insurance issue, but maybe you've got something more to add before we stop, please. Carla.
Maybe I can start, because I have the experience of 3 different countries, German countries. In Germany, it's very normal, I would say. There's no discrimination, unfortunately, but no extra anything. In Switzerland, you have to bring a lot of money to prove your worth being there. And in Austria, you get free meals. So, they really cherish artists, and that's why it's really a country to be as an artist.
But who gives free meals?
When they find out that you work at the theater, then, oh, you're at the theater, really? Can we invite you? It's really like that.
The imminent law is going to give some opportunities, some kind of security to the artists. I don't know very much about it, so I wouldn't be able to give you details. what does exist that's a bit strange to me, and maybe that's not what you wanted to hear, is that, for example, I'm an actress, and I have not worked as an actress for the past 20 years. Should I have the right to be called an actress or not? I think that's going to be part of the new law. And I think that comes to, again, how people who are in the creative performance industry or business, or however each one wants to call it, are treated. I think the status of the artist as a law should give the people freedom, like was mentioned before, and a recognition and an appreciation that they can do things. I don't think it should be, how do you say it? Bad boundaries that do not allow you to go into the artist's sacred world, in a sense.
Well, yeah, in Kosovo case, you have this status of community, so basically you get sometimes free coffee or you can pass the queue a bit easier. But it was, yes, yeah, that's true. This is where Austria learned this, from the Balkans, actually. But otherwise, there is no like official status. But again, like I'm repeating this, but I'm also anxious to see what the outcome of all this new, beautiful law that we have in Kosovo, arts and culture, will be. But in the law, there is mention that the status of the artist will be regulated. What will that be, except getting coffee and free queues? I have no idea.
Sorry, Bandelimu. I think in terms also of the question that we asked in the beginning of where are we, I think we are again at the point where we need to move them. Whether this means to move them with our art, whether it means to move them from their positions to a new position, whether it means to understand the point of view of the artist in order to make the environments that we will function in. Again, we find ourselves in what you very well said in the beginning. We have to remember why we're doing this. This is, again, to move people from their position and to move them.
In Greece, I think it's a matter of fame and money. They're not. Yes, they're okay. By law, we're all equal. We're not discriminated. But if you're not quite successful or famous director or performer, it's not very well accepted to say to a person, I'm a performer, I'm a theater director. So there is, it's not so well accepted, and what we can say is that the major discrimination has to do with the working conditions, especially of the performers. Because theater directors, dramaturgs, oceanographers are in a better position. Performers need to do many different works. And when I say different, I mean not only to play in several different productions, but different works that have nothing to do with theater, and not only in a young age. It's after it's my first year. No, it's a common pattern in the lives of performers, even in maybe in all of their lives. This, of course, it has to do with the working condition, but it is, I think, the major discrimination that we can see.
The public opinion in Greece that artists are a bit lazy, you know, that kind of thing. You know, there's not much respect in terms of like artistic work still.
Only German artists. Sorry. Certainly not Greek artists. No.
In Germany, how your law recognizes who is an artist or not?
I don't know. I don't know. I think everybody can call himself an artist.
or
So I don't know if there's a law which says. We have a lot of laws. We are the country with most laws in Europe.
and over-regulation is the word that was already mentioned here. Thank you. Dear ladies, dear gentlemen, thank you for being a part of this discussion. I'm very sorry that not each one of you could ask question, or even if the question was asked, that could not be answered. But I hope we can start a discussion to just move forward for the future, and tomorrow is the next day for the future. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your participation. Remember, people of theater, that democracy is impossible without art and without theater, and theater can be a laboratory for future, and certainly is, and your work is very important for us from outside point of view. Thank you for being with us. Marina Maleni, Kostrym Szeremeti, Carla Meda, Pantelis, Flatsosis, sorry Pantelis. Thank you all. See you around 2 more days of Opole Showcase. Thank you.